All right.
Sorry, I was being a mime. I hope you understood everything I said with my mime. So I'm Ruth, this is Robin, and this is Oreo. We're back for another week of A Mirror Darkly Unbridled Inquiry, and today's question is, should Bill Cosby still be in jail? Technically, he was in prison. I've been posting prison, but it was originally posted as jail. So anyway, so that's our topic for today. We're going to talk about our criminal justice system.
Right.
And
which is more what we're actually dealing with, and this just serves as a specific example of that.
Right. And kind of an eye grabber, like, oh, let's see what they have to say. So if you have any friends that you think might be interested, please share this webcast and invite them to join us. And so I think that's all I need to say. Oh, we do run the show in 10-minute segments when I remember to set my timer. And if there's any questions or comments, and we do want to hear from you, we'll answer them at the end of the segment. Also, if you have any show ideas, please post that in the chat as well.
Right.
So we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay. Well, whenever you have a criminal case, there are two issues that have to be considered, and you have to answer both of these questions yes. If you only answer one of them yes, then you end up with the Bill Cosby situation. And those questions are, first, is the defendant guilty? And second, did the defendant get a fair trial? If both answers aren't yes, too bad. The person cannot legitimately be convicted. If both answers aren't yes. Gosh.
Because I forgot to do this part. My phone battery is dying, so I'll have to answer on the computers probably if my phone completely dies. I forgot my charger.
Yes.
So anyway, two questions that have to be answered. Those are two questions
that have to be answered with any criminal case, which is the defendant guilty? And secondly, did the defendant get a fair trial? And this is the problem with Bill Cosby's trial, is that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court determined that it wasn't fair, and therefore he has been released because they violated his constitutional rights. And that's a huge no-no in the United States.
Yep.
Now, legitimately, you can be upset that a person that is probably guilty got let loose. However, in our justice system, there's several things that are unique to the way the United States does things. That is, there's not a lot of places that follow these same ideals. One is that we presume innocence on the part of the people that are accused. I remember one time I was in a jury, and the defense attorney said that if the prosecution didn't give any evidence and the defense didn't give any evidence, then how do you have to vote on the person that's been accused of the crime? You have to vote not guilty, right, because there is no preponderance. You have to have evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. Well, if there's no evidence presented, you certainly have a reasonable doubt. Just because the person was accused demonstrates nothing.
And it's not that way in every country.
No, it's not.
I was watching one of my crime things on Netflix.
Yes, she likes to do that. She's trying to figure out how she can kill me and get away with it. That's what all husbands believe about their wives, because so many women seem to enjoy.
Yes. I know I can't dispose of his body rolled up in a rug or in a garbage bag, because other people that watch crime dramas know that there's bodies in rolled up rugs and in garbage bags.
Yeah, that's what you assume. We go on a walk and there's a garbage bag on the day before pickup of trash, and she
Yes.
assumes, there's a dead body.
Well,
there.
that's the day to get rid of the body. You don't want to leave it out there stinking up the neighborhood for a week. You put it out on pickup day.
Yes, so all the garbage cans are full of dead bodies.
Yeah. Well, and that's why he keeps sniffing that one rug that's out on the sidewalk, because there's a small body in there, just part of a body in there.
Yeah.
But anyway,
a body part.
Yeah, it's just
like
a leg
hand or
a
a foot
hand,
or
yeah.
something. Yes.
So anyway, what point was I making? Oh, anyway, this woman who was French was living in Ireland. She's a French citizen, and she was murdered in Ireland. But because they didn't have sufficient evidence that the person that they thought committed the crime may have committed they didn't have enough evidence to support the position that he may have committed the crime. They did not bring any charges. This woman's been dead for like 20 years or something. Anyway, in France, you don't need beyond a reasonable doubt. In France, you just need a bouquet of indications that they did it. So it's kind of like our civil law where you just need preponderance of the evidence. Like, there's enough evidence here, they probably did it, let's convict them. But was it Ben Franklin that said better that 10 guilty go free than one innocent person go to prison?
I'm not sure who it is that said it, but that's basically the way the United States thinks about things.
Right.
That is, you do have some victims' rights advocates that don't agree with that, but I think that they are mistaken. And anyone that would end up being charged with something appreciates, I'm sure, the fact that there's got to be some strong evidence to demonstrate that they're guilty. I mean, if you're an innocent person, you've been charged, you want everything to be on your side as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And that's the way the Constitution has set things up. The Fifth Amendment is pretty clear. It states that no person may be compelled to testify against himself, and that no person may be tried for a second time on a charge for which he has already been acquitted. So you can't, just keep bringing him back again until you get the verdict that you want. Which
in Italy they can do because, again, Netflix, the girl whose roommate was murdered, she's an American girl, her roommate was murdered, and they thought that she had done it because of some weird sex act or something that was going on. Anyway, they didn't get the verdict that they wanted, and so they retried her. And she's been tried at least twice, maybe 3 times. Mm-hmm. And if she goes back to Italy, they could rearrest her and retry her again. And basically, and it was like, and then the jury isn't the final arbiter of the decision, the judge is. So the jury could say that the person is guilty or innocent, but then the judge can say, well, I don't like that decision, so I'm going to make it my own decision and say the opposite. So, for all that people complain about our jury system and what a pain in the neck it is to go be on a jury, trust me, if you're sitting at the defendant's seat, you're going to want that jury. You're going to want our justice system, not other justice systems. Right. Flawed though it is, because it's made by humans and run by humans. It's made by humans,
but part of the reason our system is designed the way it is because our founding fathers recognized how flawed human beings can be, and they had experience with the justice system of England at the time and realized, and other parts of Europe, and realized, we should make some alterations to make things better for defendants. Because again, you do not want to convict someone of a crime that they did not do. And that sadly still happens even under our system. Mm-hmm. We just minimize it as much as possible, but the reality is that people get railroaded and they have bad defense attorneys. That is, you have the public defender system because it was recognized that not everyone can afford to pay for a defense attorney, and so the state provides that for you. Unfortunately,
that is also a flawed system.
That's also a flawed system because the Court-appointed defense attorneys are way overworked. There's far more for them to do than what they can easily do within the amount of time they have, and so again, you still have problems.
And they're woefully underpaid.
Yes.
So one thing we learned in our adoption adventures is that if you have a private attorney, you're at the top of the docket. If you have a court-appointed attorney, you come up when you come up. And if you don't come up that day, hopefully you come up the next. Now, in adoptions, it wasn't that way. But really, and we had good court-appointed attorneys. It's not that they weren't doing their job.
Yeah, see, this is the key thing. It's not that court-appointed attorneys are bad attorneys. It's just that the system is bad because they get far more cases than any person can legitimately handle because they are shorthanded. And yeah, it's just it's just the way things have worked out. But most of the court-appointed attorneys are very dedicated, they work hard, they do the best they possibly can, but they are way overworked. Same thing happens with social workers. That is, social workers are, again, way overworked. They have far more cases than what any human being can actually handle. And so they have to try to prioritize, and sometimes they guess wrong.
Yeah.
Which is sad. And
another case in point with the public defender, we have someone who used to come to, they were supposed to move, but anyway, someone who used to come to our church, and his girlfriend died tragically as a result of injuries from an incident that happened in his vehicle. She fell out, climbed out, we're not really sure, but basically the charges were that he pushed her out and killed her. Well, in the days following, when she was still alive, they were letting him be in the hospital there with her, and he was helping to care for her and things like that. And then when she died, then suddenly now he's arrested. I mean, he wasn't even arrested for attempted homicide or anything like that. Nothing like that happened. And then once she died, then they decided to arrest him. Well, he decided to take a plea agreement because his court-appointed attorney said that there's other stuff in his past that he was concerned that the judge would allow. And I don't know if the court-appointed attorney said this, but it was clearly implied that the court-appointed attorney didn't have the resources to make sure that stuff was kept out of his court case, that he was really concerned the judge was going to allow it. And even though this person had changed their life, the attorney still was really concerned that he would end up spending a lot more years in prison, and being of the age that he is, he was concerned that the prison sentence would carry him right to his death, versus taking a plea agreement. He would have less time in prison, and he would be able to hopefully get out still being alive. So he went ahead and took the plea agreement. So he's currently in prison, possibly for a crime that he didn't commit. We don't know because we weren't there. We know what he told us. We know what the actions were of the hospital and other people around him following her injury. But, just it's hard to say if he did or didn't cause her death. Yes. Anyway,
without a trial and without the evidence, then you're left with just guessing.
Yeah, so his attorney was really concerned he'd get a much longer sentence, so he decided to, based upon his past, to go ahead and take the lower plea agreement, and so he's currently serving prison time.
Yeah.
So, okay, we don't have any comments or questions, and at the moment I don't even think we have a viewer on here, so hopefully somebody shows up soon.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yes.
I mean, today everything is working smoothly, so obviously nobody will show up.
Yes. Yeah, it's not really windy today, so it's running very smoothly.
Part of there are two issues with Bill Cosby's trial that were at issue for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. One was the fact that in the civil case that preceded the criminal case, the prosecutor had told Bill Cosby that he would not be prosecuted criminally if he testified in his
In the civil case.
in the civil case. And so Bill Cosby agreed to go ahead and do that. And then, of course, they used that against him in the criminal case.
And different prosecutor,
Different
though.
prosecutor, though. The problem with that, and the reason Pennsylvania Supreme Court said now that you can't do that, is because it violates the Fifth Amendment. That is, he was coerced into testifying against himself. That's a no-no. You can't do that. And so that alone was sufficient. The other aspect of the case that was problematic was bringing in witnesses or people that made claims that he had done the same sort of thing to them that he was accused of in this specific case. The problem was, though, that those witnesses, what they were saying hadn't been proven. That is, they hadn't had cases. As it wasn't like he had been convicted on this 4 or 5 times previously, and so this is just one more time.
Well, and the statute of limitations had run out on those other crimes.
And so they really had, I mean, the reason that the prosecutor had told Bill Cosby that he wouldn't be criminally charged is because the case was weak, because it fundamentally came down to a he said, she said situation. And those are inherently hard to successfully prosecute. And so you had a whole bunch more of he said, she said, but no evidence, no proof, and yet those were used to help convict him of this crime. Now, outside of the legal system, we look at that and say, yeah, he's probably guilty because you have all these people saying this sort of thing. They're not talking amongst themselves and coming up with whatever they're going to say, as far as we know, and so we tend to think that he's probably guilty of all these things. However, from the standpoint of the protections granted to us by the Constitution, no, you can't do that, and that's what the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decided. And those constitutional protections are good. They're not a bad thing, despite what some victims' rights advocates will try to say. That is, you cannot assume that a person is guilty. You cannot violate their constitutional rights when you try them.
There are people that, and they'll ask you specifically about this in jury duty, is do you feel that someone is guilty just because they've been arrested for the crime? It's like, because, okay, so I raised my kids with this idea that when you go shopping at the mall with your friends, you go hang out at the mall with your friends, security is watching you because you're a group of young girls and who tends to shoplift, young girls in groups. Now, you may not shoplift, but one of your friends or your friend's friends might, and you're all there together. So I told my girls, you are guilty by association. In my eyes, maybe not in the Constitution, but in my eyes, you're guilty by association. So if you get picked up and they decide that you're going to juvenile hall because you were stealing from a store, then you have to suffer those consequences. I was taught the same thing. It made me very aware of who I was with, what we were doing, and I always just shopped with like 1 or 2 other really good friends, and we never left with anything that wasn't ours, and I was super duper careful. And I just wanted to heighten their awareness that that could happen. And they could swear to me up and down they didn't steal. They could, tell me I would never do such a thing. It was so-and-so's friend that came along. I didn't even invite her. Too bad. You're in a crowd that someone stole, and now you're all in trouble. And but constitutionally it doesn't work that way. Just because you've been arrested for something, even if you're in a bad situation, like you're in a bar and and you're in a seedy place or something like that, and you get picked up for something, that does not
make you guilty.
That does not make you guilty. You can still plead not guilty, and the jury needs to assume you're not guilty until enough evidence is brought.
Yeah, and even if you have done bad things in the past, it doesn't necessarily mean you're guilty of this particular bad thing that has happened.
We ran into this with the jury that I was on. I was the alternate, so I didn't get to deliberate, but I deliberated in my own brain while they were up deliberating in the deliberation room. I was sitting alone in the jury room and just sat there thinking, okay, what, if I was up there talking to them, what might be the arguments that the other jurors bring up and what conclusion would we come to? Well, it ended up being a hung jury. And so then the assistant DA talked to us along with the defense attorney to ask us why it was that it was a hung jury. And the biggest issue that came up was, so one of the things they asked us was, do you believe a police officer's testimony just because he's a police officer? And my response was no, because he's still human, but he probably has more weight than just the dude's friend, you know. So to me that's reasonable. So anyway, they basically what it came down to was there was a locksmith. This car had really funky locks on it. The crime was a felon with a gun, but he claims the gun was in the car and it was locked in the car and he couldn't get to it. Well, the police officer said that he was outside the car, the door was open, he threw the gun inside the car and closed the door. This door had faulty locks, and so you couldn't like get right back into the car. So they had a locksmith that had come out the previous day having nothing to do with this crime whatsoever, but had gotten into that car, and with his assistant, with his special tools, it took him 45 minutes to get into the car. So that was really key testimony, because the police officer said once they impounded the car, they were able to pop the locks and get right in. Well, we knew from the other testimony that it took 2 people, special tools, and 45 minutes to get in the day before. So now, did the officer just misspeak and like they had worked at it, but it, you know, they were able to pop it open in 45 minutes? He didn't give that in his testimony. And that's what we told him. That's where the case fell down. Everybody, all the jurors felt that this guy was probably guilty. But because the locksmith's testimony did not jive with the police officer's testimony, there was reasonable doubt. And so some of us had to say not guilty. Some still said guilty because we were all convinced he probably did it. But for many of us, that held up in the 2 testimonies. You know, if it had been his friend and said, oh yeah, we tried to get into the car and dude, we couldn't get in, you know, and then the police officer said he popped it right open, that probably wouldn't have mattered to us. But because it was a professional locksmith, had nothing to do with this incident, had just interacted with the same car. So anyway, so I don't know when he was retried if he was ever convicted or anything. I never followed up on it, but it was still interesting to be in that situation, because that really was a reasonable doubt thing. And the guy was a felon. He was, you know, he had done his time, or he was on parole or something. I don't know. I don't remember. But he was a felon, so he'd been convicted of a felony. He was not supposed to have a gun, and he clearly was in possession of a gun at some point in the incident. So that was a really interesting jury to be on because of that.
Yeah, but it illustrates how the system works. And I mean, no matter what system you have, it's going to be imperfect, and things will happen that you would prefer not to happen. As we would prefer not to let guilty people go. But we would rather that, this is the choice that our society has made, than the innocent people should be convicted. And that seems a good choice to me, despite what some victims' rights advocates will say. You see this particularly, the counter approach to things, in some universities that will convict people just on the basis of an accusation. And that essentially violates the way our system works. That is, college students should not be summarily punished or thrown out just because somebody made an accusation against them.
Right.
But there's a tendency for that to happen. And there's even resistance on the part of some government officials to enforcing constitutional legal requirements on the way universities function. And that strikes me as odd.
Well, if they're accepting federal funding, they should be under that blanket. But if
They
it's
should be, but they're not.
right,
And that, to me, that seems wrong. That is, just because you're in college, that doesn't mean your constitutional rights go out the window. I have the same difficulty with the penchant for some people to censor things. And the argument is, well, it's a private company, or it's this, or it's that. Well, yeah, they can get away with it, but the whole concept of censoring, in my mind, is bad. That is, you should not have that desire to censor because, this is going off topic now, but the ideal is that the best response to bad speech is not censorship. The best response to bad speech is more speech. That is, you bring more speech to bear against the person that is saying something stupid, wrong, evil, whatever. You don't silence them. You don't keep them from being able to be
unfriend
stupid.
them.
That is, people are allowed to be stupid. People are allowed to be wrong. What you do is you correct them. You give evidence contrary to what they've said. You argue against their point of view, on and on. You don't need to censor them.
Yeah.
That's just an error, I think.
Yeah.
But again, it goes back to this concept of our rights as individuals.
Let's make that a topic: censorship and constitutional rights, because that's kind of a hot topic right now.
Yeah.
With the whole Facebook thing and coronavirus and that.
Yeah. That is, censorship just is not a good idea. That is, it is human nature to want to do that. The concept of freedom of speech, freedom of the press, is a relatively recent in human civilization idea, but I think it's a good one. And I think the counter to that is wrong-headed in all circumstances.
Yeah.
As I'm pretty much an absolutist when it comes to freedom of speech and freedom of the press. That is, there are a lot of things that people write and say that I don't like. There are a lot of things that people write and say that are just evil and awful. But I prefer that be allowed, because otherwise my speech can be curtailed. It's like,
And that's the thing. You always have to put yourself in that position.
Right.
What if it was me that was being wrongfully accused? What if it was me that was being censored? And that's where the rubber really meets the road. And that's where this piece is really important. So instead of saying, yeah, but, think to yourself, what if this was me, and what if these accusations weren't true?
Yeah, what if I'm being silenced? What if I'm being put in
What
jail?
if what he was doing was consensual? Now, take out the fact that he's married or whatever, because, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. I'm sure his wife could do more damage to him than any prison system could.
Yes.
But,
And well, she should.
right. But, and I admire her actually for sticking with him. I really do. I don't know that I would be that generous, but it depends on the situation. But, because the likelihood that you would have 20 women with pretty much the same story over many, many years, accusing you of the very same thing. Like, you look at the Matt Gaetz thing. There was one woman, she was never identified, and it's not really gone anywhere, so I'm going to call foul on that, because I don't think that Matt Gaetz did anything inappropriate. Like, he may have had sex with someone he wasn't married to, but in America that's not a crime. He wasn't married to somebody else. He's a single, healthy male, and he slept with somebody. And if it was consensual, there's nothing you can do about it. So, but when you have 20 women or however many it was saying that this had happened over a long period of time, their stories are all pretty much the same. The likelihood that he did it is higher than the average person. What makes me sad about the fact that, and I don't know if it would have happened if just the civil lawsuit had gone through, like if he had just settled out of court and paid the women off. But what makes me sad about the criminal thing of him being guilty is that, like, every night on TV land, there was like 4 or 5 hours of the Cosby Show. And there are people that get paid residuals that are not Bill Cosby based on that show. So by that show being taken off the air, like, you can't find a Bill Cosby anything anywhere. I mean, you might be able to on YouTube and stuff. But the people that were getting residuals from that are not Bill Cosby are being punished. Right. And I find that unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
And there
are people suffering beyond the people that he is accused of having done something bad with.
Right. And it caused more damage. Now, you could blame that on him. Say, well, if you weren't such a reptile, this wouldn't have happened. Mm-hmm. But it's unfortunate that it went all the way to this court case and the guilty verdict, because that's what people are going to remember. Even if and the Supreme Court didn't say he wasn't guilty.
No.
They just said he had been tried unfairly.
Right.
So he's going to have this shadow over his name forever, and that will be the, Bill Cosby, convicted sex offender, was a very famous comedian. I mean, he has this great body of work that, like, I will quote him sometimes, and I will start it off with, I know he's a persona non grata right now, but, because what he said was funny, and a lot of it was true.
And this is one of the other things that's hard, and you see this in those that want to censor things, mm-hmm. is if this human being did bad things, then can we separate him doing bad things or her doing bad things from their art, their music, their mm-hmm. whatever it is they've produced?
Right.
And for some people, they don't seem to be able to do that.
Yes. I saw that on a clip. It was Jerry Seinfeld talking to Stephen Colbert, mm-hmm. and I think it was about Bill Cosby. And Jerry Seinfeld said, I separate the man from the art. He has created a lot of really good comedy, and Stephen Colbert was, I can't do that. Mm-hmm. Which also explains why Stephen Colbert is the way he is with a lot of other things, too. I don't like him.
But it's an interesting question, and it's interesting to see how people come down on that mm-hmm. and their reasons for it. And the problem with not being able to separate art from the person that produces the art is we have to recognize that all human beings are imperfect. Right. All human beings have done things that are bad. And so if that's the case, then if you're going to, that is, where do you draw the line as to what you're going to stop?
I need the mouse.
Oh.
Thank you. So we had a comment. Finish what your thought is, and then. Sorry.
That is, where do you draw the line and say, okay, well, this person is beyond the pale, and so we're not going to pay any attention to their art anymore. And so drawing that line becomes very fuzzy and hard mm-hmm. to define. Because you can find some really nasty people that, okay, this aspect of what they've produced is actually okay.
Mm-hmm. Or in the reverse, Stephen King. He writes really scary, creepy stuff. He's not scary and creepy in real life.
Right.
So, like, he has a book that he wrote.
On writing.
No, there's a book that you wrote where, like, the
horrible things happen.
This guy was hanging women's dismembered legs on the walls, and I was like, who have I married? So we don't have any human legs hanging on our walls. I don't even remember what book that is. What book is that?
I don't remember now. But anyway.
But, so you have to separate the artist from the art.
Yes.
Because who they are in real life is not who they are mm-hmm. in their art necessarily.
Yeah, that is, most horror authors and most people that enjoy horror movies are not actually serial killers. Mm-hmm. They're not evil people. They don't like to torture people. I mean, it's a story. Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth Montgomery wasn't really a witch.
Right.
Barbara, what was her name? I want to say Streisand, and that's not it. Barbara Eden was not a genie in real life, but they played one on TV.
Yeah, well, Larry Niven, science fiction author, did a lot of work with Jerry Pournelle, and they're famous for their collaborations, a lot of times more than their individual work. But anyway, he got a letter once from, I've used this illustration before, he got a letter once from a person that read one of his novels complaining about how awful Larry Niven has to be because of what this particular character believed and said and did. And Larry Niven wrote back to him and said, "We authors have a technical term for people that confuse the character's character and point of view and beliefs with the author's character and point of view and beliefs. We call those people idiots." Because it's not the same. That is, if you write a story, you have to have bad guys and good guys. Otherwise, the story is really boring.
Yeah. If everybody was just a replica of you, this is why you're not an author.
Yeah. That is, when you watch the movie Die Hard, you've got some really reprehensible people. Do you think those actors are actually like that? Do you think the author of the movie is like that? Probably not.
No, Johnny Depp is not a pirate.
No, or any
Nor
other
does he have
characters.
scissors for hands.
Yes.
So, okay, so Holly has joined us and she says she has his final meaning, Bill Cosby. 33 LPs from my childhood. Our family loved listening to his clean humor.
Yeah,
she says, I've always loved Bill Cosby. I had a hard time believing he committed the crimes. Maybe women jumped on the bandwagon. Yeah, I don't know how much like collusion there would have been between the women, like calling each other, or if there were enough separate incidents. But I do know that all but one of the cases was too old to do anything with. So only the one woman was most recent that they could do anything about, and barely, So I know I have a hard time believing it too, but in as much as Stephen King is not a serial killer and monster and all that, you know, somebody who is very wholesome in his public life could be creepy and gross in his private life. So
that is, the persona that you see publicly is not necessarily what the person is behind the scenes, because particularly when you're dealing with an actor. They can portray good guys, bad guys, you have no idea, and it really doesn't matter what they are as an individual. It is paying attention to the actor's actual personality, actual political views, all of that really has no bearing whatsoever on what they have done performance-wise.
Right.
I get a little annoyed by people getting mad at a given actor because of what they believe politically or causes they support or any of that, because that doesn't matter to them as the character on this TV show, movie, whatever.
I love Johnny Depp's acting. I love the characters that he's portrayed. I will go to Johnny Depp movies. He hates America. He has said it out loud. He mostly resides in France. My attitude was, well, America kind of made you rich, so thank you for the compliment. But he hates America, and but I enjoy his movies, and the thing I like about Johnny Depp the most, besides the fact he's really hot, is that you look at a character in a movie and you go, is that Johnny Depp?
Yes.
Because
it's hard to tell.
Yes, and it's not just the makeup. It is really hard to tell that it's a different person.
Yeah, he's really, really talented. He's very good. He can portray any
extremely talented
kind of person whatsoever.
Yeah.
Couple of TV shows that I've watched where I was really impressed by the actors. What's his name? J.K. Simmons? Is that his name? But anyway,
not ringing a bell over here.
Well, the guy that played the father of Chris Pratt in the movie that we just watched, The Tomorrow War.
Oh.
That guy.
No idea. I look it up on my phone, but my phone's really good.
He was in another series a couple of years ago, and now the name just went out of it. But anyway, it was a parallel universe. And he played a character, one in this universe and one in the other universe, and their personalities are radically different. And it's just remarkable to see him pull that off. I mean, that's pretty good. That is, you have to be a really good actor in order to do, you're doing the same person, but with entirely different life experiences and entirely different ways of approaching the world. And he pulled it off. The TV series was J.J. Abrams' series. Shoot, name just went out of my head again.
Geez, you sound like me.
Oh, I'm getting old.
Are you a
No,
perimenopausal woman?
No. But anyway, again, you had parallel universes, one character playing radically different individuals. I'm impressed by that ability. But that shows you just how good and what's sad in both cases is this particular actor, and both that one and Simmons in this thing, they don't get any Emmy nominations or anything or any recognition, and yet that's clearly really good acting. That is, they're top notch in their craft. Anyway, the point is that you cannot tell watching an actor anything about them as an individual, assuming they're good at what they're doing.
Right.
They don't just play themselves, they play whatever it is they need to play.
Yeah.
And that's really good. And I appreciate that. And I really don't care who they are as a person. It doesn't matter. Same thing with a musician. They can be a reprobate, but if they produce good music and I enjoy it, that's really all that matters. There's a philosopher that people will argue about because he joined the Nazi cause during World War II. What's his name? Heidegger. But Heidegger, his philosophy has had some impact on things, and so how do you separate his Nazism from what he did as a philosopher? There are connections, but yet there's some differences. Again, is their body of work entirely to be tossed out because of their attitude? A classic example in music is Wagner. Wagner was a horrible anti-Semite, but his music is phenomenal. And for a lot of years, they wouldn't play Wagner in Israel because of that. But there's been some pushback against that attitude because, again, you cannot deny the value of his music.
It's not like you're going to him for advice on how to treat your Jewish friend.
Right.
You're listening to his music.
Yeah.
So, you have to encapsulate these people. Like, okay, so like Bill Cosby, I love his comedy. Would I go to him for relationship advice?
Probably not.
Probably not. Although he's been married to his wife for a really long time, so
but
he's doing
still,
something right.
Or his wife is just really
really tolerant.
tolerant.
So, yeah. So, Holly said they tossed out Dr. Seuss. Yeah, and that's...
Well, it's 4 of his books, and that's, again, I view that as censorship. That is, if you don't like what this person produced, that's fine. You don't have to read it, you don't have to buy it. But to say that we're just going to destroy all the copies and never sell it, that seems going beyond what's reasonable. Plus, also, there's inconsistencies in this. That is, for instance, the book Mein Kampf, which is Adolf Hitler's work where he lays out, his way of doing things and what he wants to have happen.
Daddy's gonna hate
horrible piece of work, but it's still available. You can buy it on Amazon. Should it be available on Amazon? I would argue yes, because again, it's a historical document. It tells us something about who this horrible person in history was. And it can serve as a warning and so on. That is, just because something is bad doesn't mean that we need to toss it out. Karl Marx wrote, together with Engels, the Communist Manifesto and then his magnum opus Das Kapital. Marx's ideas are junk. They're garbage. Does that mean that we should just burn all his books? No. Again, what he has produced has had a significant impact on the world, I would argue negatively, but still, it's something that needs to be available.
And
you correct Mein Kampf, you correct Das Kapital not by banning them,
But by
talking about them, producing more speech, more work to counter it.
So on Read Across America Day, because they took Dr. Seuss's name off of Read Across America Day, it's his birthday.
Yes.
But so I found a read aloud, and remember I was teaching online, so I couldn't read to my kids an actual book. I had to find read alouds on YouTube. And so I saw it on Mulberry Street, and we read it. And we talked about the stereotypical images that were in there. I only found one, and apparently there were more. But because to me it was funny, and it was, it was just.
Well, then the question, when you think,
do we make everybody look alike too?
Yeah, do you make everybody look alike? Also, what stereotypes then are offensive versus what aren't? And see, that becomes problematic.
We've
that is, if
just jumped into a whole nother topic.
Yes, we have. If you have a Texan and you put him in a big hat and cowboy boots, is that a bad thing that you are stereotyping him that way? See, that it's just kind of weird. That is, people in certain countries dressed historically in different ways than people in other countries dressed historically. Different historical periods, people are dressing different ways. Fashions come and go. And so if you're doing a movie and you're portraying people living in the 1960s, you're going to create a certain vibe by putting them in obviously 60s era clothing, even though not everybody dressed like a hippie. Right. In fact, most people didn't. But that's the image we have of it, and so you want a movie and you want your audience to immediately recognize you're in the 60s. That's an easy way to do it. It's a shorthand.
Not all white mothers in the 50s wore pearls and high heels and pumps when they vacuumed.
No.
But that's a stereotype that's out there, because that's what June Cleaver did. And she actually did it because she had a gap in here in her collarbone. You can't see mine because I'm a little too chubby. But she had a gap in her collarbone that caused a shadow, and so they put pearls on her so it would get rid of the shadow. That's why she wore pearls in the show.
But
not because that's what...
Thing.
Right.
And it's a stereotype. Are all stereotypes evil?
It depends on the purpose. And Dr. Seuss's purpose for writing the book wasn't to make fun of Rajas and Chinese people.
Right.
It was that this boy had this amazing imagination when all he really did was come home from school, but all these amazing things happened in his way.
Stereotypes become evil when they are used for the purpose of mocking and denigrating a group of people, not when you're just identifying them. So it's much more complicated than people make it out to be. And again, I would argue that you do not ban or censor speech, ideas, concepts, words that you don't like, images, music, whatever. You counter it with more words, more images, more arguments, more ideas. And that's been the argument for freedom of speech and freedom of press from its inception a few hundred years ago.
Right. So that's the introduction to our next topic. What time are we looking at here? Okay, about 12 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
So back to innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, innocent until proven guilty is a powerful concept because it forces you to be see, the idea of it is that you need to be convinced by the evidence that this person has done this horrible thing that needs to be punished. That is, you need to be convinced of it. You have to have some evidence. You got to demonstrate that, yes, this person actually did this horrible thing. Not just, this person says he did it. Well, okay. Does this person just not like this person, wants to get him in trouble? You've got to have more going on. I mean, even the biblical concept of things is you have to have 2 or 3 witnesses. And you have, even with that, the idea that these things need to be examined and checked and verified, and you've got to have some evidence. Just getting 3 people to agree on something doesn't necessarily prove it either.
Right.
There has to
Well,
be more than that.
I can do that to third graders.
Yes.
Kids would have a squabble on the playground that would come back to the classroom, and they'd be like, well, he did this. No, I didn't. He did that. And I don't have time to deal with it. So I would tell them, you sit outside the classroom door and you come up with one story that you can both agree to, and then call me back out here. So I go on and teach my lesson, and they're sitting out on the ramp outside the classroom, and they're coming up with one story. And so then they'll motion me out, and then I'll step outside the door. I'll say, okay, do you have one story you can both agree to? Yes. Okay, one of you tell me the story. I'm going to ask you if you agree to it. So you tell me the story. And they'll say, well, I kind of accidentally kicked him in the ankle, and then he kind of accidentally punched me in the stomach. We're friends now. And it's like, and that's my whole point, is to just get it out there and get them to work through it and get them back in the classroom without me having to take time from the other 28 kids working through their issues. So, but you can get people to agree to anything, especially if they think they're going to get somebody else in trouble.
Yeah,
and
people
especially
like to get people in
because
trouble.
pretty much everybody's an 8-year-old at heart. That's what I teach, 8 and 9-year-olds.
Yeah.
And everybody's 8 and 9-year-olds at heart. And you know, if you want to get somebody in trouble and you get a couple of your friends together that don't like that person either, you can be 8, you can be 28, you can be 48, you can get people to agree to collude against a person, and they'll do it. Yeah. So that's why people are separated when they give testimony. The police officers, when they get into the situation, they separate people out. When our daughter was really severely buried in her mental illness, we called the deputies. They kept her outside and talked to her. They had us inside and talked to us. And it's just common practice. And that's what I do with kids. When there's a problem on the playground, it's rarely a problem in the classroom. It's
Right.
mostly on the playground. And so I separate them out. I say, you two go sit down, separate seats, and I talk to this kid. Then I talk to the next kid. Then I talk to the next kid. And then I try to find what is common about what might have happened. And then I'll pull them together and say, okay, this is what I'm hearing from you guys. This, and this. Is that what happened? Yes. Okay. You're benched at next recess. You're fine. You just go to the nurse to get some ice or whatever. But depending on the situation. But because people will collude against other people to get them in trouble if they don't like them.
Right. And see, one of the images from our justice system, if you see a statue of justice, she has a blindfold on. And the reason for that is the idea that everybody would be treated equally. Mm-hmm. One of the tendencies is to think, okay, if it's a rich person, they must be guilty, or if it's a poor person, they must be guilty, or if they're this disadvantaged group, or, do the intersectionality thing. That should have nothing to do with our system of justice. Mm-hmm. That is, who the person is, what color their skin is, what their demographic is, what their ethnicity is, what language they speak, what religion they are. None of that needs to be taken into account when we determine whether or not a person is guilty of a given crime.
Right.
That is, who they are, poverty-wise, wealth-wise, skin color-wise. None of that matters in the justice system, or at least ideally shouldn't. Reality is that sometimes that does sway people one way or the other on juries. It shouldn't. But people are flawed. Again, the system is designed to try to overcome those flaws. We have examples throughout history where it didn't. There are an awful lot of African Americans, particularly in the South, that were railroaded because you have an all-white jury and it's a black man, and so they just decide they're guilty because they're a black man. Mm-hmm. That's not the way the system is designed to work.
I'm really pleased that DNA has now become part of the culture of the courtroom.
Right.
Because, there are people that were wrongfully convicted that have since been released, exonerated because the DNA didn't match.
Right.
And it was fascinating to watch during the OJ trial because DNA was so new then, and I don't think the jury understood
probably not
what
because
it meant.
It was new.
Right. That literally, I don't remember the numbers, but of 5 billion people, he's the only person that could have done it. Versus they were like, well, it's a 1 in 5 billion chance he did it, so he obviously is innocent. And which is not what it meant, but they were confused. And I've watched stuff on it since, and they tried explaining it, but I don't think the explanation was adequate enough. But they just didn't understand how that DNA thing works. Now we understand that if it's 1 in 5 billion, that means you did it, dude. There is like nobody else. If it's like 1 in 3, well, there's somebody else not too far away that could have done it, you know. So
yeah.
But I'm really glad for the DNA part of it. And it's quite interesting too, because some really old crimes, like those sex workers in Long Island, they have caught somebody now that they believe did it. There's old blood evidence. Sometimes they're able to get, like these cold cases and stuff, they're able to get DNA from it. And so they're able to get a match. Like it's somebody who, you know, died in prison or whatever. But
so that works both ways. It exonerates some people, or it catches who actually is responsible.
What's
for the
really
bad
fascinating is when they put it together through family members.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Through like 23andMe and all that kind of stuff.
Ancestry.com.
Yeah, through Ancestry. Yeah.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, it's an interesting added thing. It gets harder and harder, at least in a perfect world, to avoid getting caught for your misdeeds.
Yep. So Holly was saying she loves my dog. I love my dog too.
Yeah.
He's just so cute. I can't stand it.
Yeah, he's very cute, but he
bites.
Yeah, he bites. He's not nice.
He's beautiful on the outside, but not on the inside. Yeah, you say someone's beautiful inside and out. Not true at this point, but he's learning.
Yeah, he's getting better.
Slowly.
Part of it is just because he suffered before he got to us, and so we're trying to train the unfortunate, help him with his PTSD.
Yes. But he knows that when Daddy comes to bed, Daddy gives treats. Oh, but then I found this out. I didn't know this. So here's a cute story. So if he goes to bed before me, see, I thought he would just go to bed and then I'd crawl into bed and it's all good and I go to sleep. And then Oreo doesn't bug him. No. And I've been wondering where Oreo goes. Oreo runs back to the bedroom, gets up on the bed and sits and waits patiently for him to bring treats to the bed.
If I don't,
he throws,
I'm in trouble.
Yeah, he throws the treats, like he'll throw a treat on the bed and he'll pull back the covers, throw another treat on the bed, he'll sit on the bed, and he throws out a treat for everything he needs to do in order to lay down to go to sleep.
Because otherwise he barks and attacks
and tries to snap at him. Yeah, and then Robin does the blackjack dealer thing, all gone, and then Oreo jumps down and comes back out to me, and I'm like, where were you, Betty? I have no idea where he went. Yeah. I just figured he went to get a drink of water.
No, he went to shake me down. Yeah. He's a shakedown artist.
Yes.
He's going to shake down the poor person.
It's the Mutt Mafia.
Yeah,
which I think is super funny. But when I'm in bed and Robin's getting ready for bed, Oreo sits like this and watches him. I'm like, okay, where's my treats?
Yeah, if I don't bring the treats, I'm in trouble. He'll bark at me, snap at me. But if I give him the treats, I can go to sleep. Whether it's when Ruth is there or not, I've got to give him treats in order to go to sleep.
Yes.
Evil monster.
But he's a cute evil monster.
Our thought is that he was probably in a household where the woman was being mistreated by the man. And
he's very protective.
He's very protective of Ruth, which is good. But
and I take him places.
Dangerous.
Like today, there was a Boy Scout event here at the church, and I came to unlock, and they were already here because I misunderstood the times. They were doing the regatta before the event, before the sign-up event.
They started earlier than you anticipated?
Yeah, well, she had told me, but I misunderstood it. And I told her, I'm so sorry. She goes, it's okay, I just think you misunderstood the times. But anyway, I had him in my arms, so I take him pretty much everywhere I go. And she's like, oh my gosh, he's so cute. I'm like, yeah, just don't pet him because he bites. And I told her, I said, I feel bad because I want people to pet him. I want him to be well socialized. I would like for him to go to people and them to pet him and enjoy him and things like that. but I don't trust him. So, and he does really well around Luca. I don't trust him around Luca. I'm right there. I'm ready to grab him.
Yeah, our grandson.
Yeah, but he was super good around Luca, and Vanessa was there, totally cool around Vanessa, but then she was standing. I was sitting on the couch. Oreo was here. Luca was there, and Vanessa was leaning over Luca and like picking up stuff that he had put, like toys or something. And because she was towering over me, he views that as a threat. And so he lunged at her and snapped, scared her because she's at a very base level, scared to death of dogs. It was just something she was born with. It had nothing to do with an actual incident. But she realized at that point that, like, wow, yeah, he is super protective of you, Mom. Now, if I stand up, she could have picked up all those toys. It would have been a big deal. Possibly he was protecting Luca, too, because I think he sees that Luca's not like the big people. But
and it's
I
possible
don't trust him.
Yeah, it's possible in the household that he's in before he came to us that children are being abused, too. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just scary to think in terms of what he has been through.
Yeah. And I don't, like, he doesn't have enough exposure to Luca for me to make that determination because I'm afraid that he'll snap at Luca and bite him.
Yeah, we don't know, so we have to assume.
I watch him very closely.
Yes, he must be
watched. I had a little guy in my class last year that has like scars by his mouth, and their family dog totally trusted him. The dog hadn't shown any signs of aggression, and the dad had gotten up to go get something. The little guy told me what happened, and the dog, he was playing with it. I don't remember what he was doing. But anyway, the dog lunged him and bit him, and he's got a permanent scar on his face, and I don't want that for Luca.
Right.
So, anyway.
Okay.
All right.
We are out of time.
Okay, now next week is the wedding. We may not
we probably will not
with the wedding
be
in time.
Doing it next week.
So we're here every Saturday at 4, except for the Saturdays we're not.
Yes.
And so likely next Saturday,
yeah,
if we can, we will post a thing. So watch the Mirror Darkly Facebook page or YouTube channel for a notification that we're going to go live. But don't count on it for next week. But we'll probably come back with censorship the following week. What do you think?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, we'll talk about censorship the following week. So you guys have a great one. Join us for church tomorrow if you want. Quartz Hill Community Church Facebook page. We live stream. We also go live on YouTube, on the church's YouTube channel at 11 a.m. Pacific time if you're not worshiping somewhere else, or if you are on the East Coast and you're already done worshiping, you want to join us, you can.
More church, then here we are.
Come join us. Anyway, have a good one. See you guys in a week or two. Wave bye, Oreo. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Everybody loves you. You're so freaking cute, but you're just evil to the little fuzzy...